We are about 44 ethnic communities, and I realized that things I didn't know when I was growing up, things I thought that were happening to my community alone, there were worse that were happening to the other 41 communities. And in college, I got pregnant out of wedlock. As usual, it happens so much in Kenya, so it's not really a very big deal for a household to have a single mother. And when I went to give birth in this public health institution in my district, where my mother gave birth to me years ago, it was in the same conditions. And this is when I realized really, and I got the first-hand oppression of women. Women were giving birth on the floor. We were sleeping in one tiny bed, 4 people, whether you had 4 women, whether you went through a cesarean or not. And being a young mother, I would see women that were almost twice the age of my mother still giving birth, and I would ask them, is this your first child? And they would tell me it's their 10th or 11th children, and they've been coming to this hospital. And I said, then how are you able to do it? They said they know no other way. And that really hurt me, and that's when I decided that I'll do all I can to address the women issues. But I did that. I thought about it when I was with my baby in hospital, but I didn't know how to do it until I spoke to my sister, who was then also in the community development, and she told me I could go back to school and be a social worker, and that's exactly what I did. My father was able to take me to college again, and I did community development, and I became a social worker at a very hard time in Kenya when HIV and AIDS was spreading like bushfire. And as I trained trainers on prevention, treatment, and creating awareness, I realized that there were so many things happening that were also contributing to the spread of HIV and AIDS. The very harmful culture of female genital cutting, window classing, and child marriage were a contributor, and a very high contributor, to the spread of the HIV and AIDS. What then would we do is to address the issues of our own customary laws, but then the same customary laws were entrenched in our constitution. There were laws, and it was acceptable for 10 kids to go and be circumcised using one weapon. I call it a weapon because it's not really fun, because they really punish those kids. And you find that if one child was born HIV positive, then they spread to the other group of the girls that they're being circumcised with. Come to think about it, also boys that were being circumcised in a group of 30 to 20, same thing was being done. And then a widow classing is where your husband dies of wearing disease, and they call it witchcraft, because your body withers, wears down, and you have to be cleansed of that disease. So you have to spend a night with one of your husband's relatives so that he can cleanse you. And this means that you're going to infect him, and he's going to infect his wife, and it becomes a vicious circle. Child marriage, where a 70-year-old man would marry a 9-year-old child, and he has 4 other wives, and in this particular community, they're allowed to share. They're allowed wife sharing. It's a customary belief. All these were contributors to HIV and AIDS. And then policy really was not my line of work, but then we also had to sit down and say, this is what is happening to the women, and the children, and what do? It's to address issues of our constitution. But then how do you address the issues of the constitution if there's no political will? Because at the end of the day, everything bottles back to the leaders. It goes back to the leaders. There's lots of illiteracy, and most of the women believed what they're told. So it was very, very hard work for me. And there were people that were addressing issues of the constitution, and it was in being drafted and redrafted. And the then regime did not want any changes within the laws. They had even to be forced in 1992 to amend the constitution to allow many political parties. Not until 1992 is when we got the multi-party elections. And that was steps in the right direction. We had many reformists getting into parliament and continuing to challenge the status quo. For 19 years, people agitated for change, to have a new constitution. Many of them live in exile. I don't know when they will ever go back. Many of them are dead. Many of them are also now in parliament. So I really do not know why they had to go through so much for those years and get to parliament and get to cabinet now and not speak. So as women, we tried also bringing in civic education, especially on gender and governance. And I was fully involved with the United Nations Funds for Women, like Joa said, and I started telling women that it's now time to get into every political, every leadership, whatever, whether it's in church, whether it's in the coffee factories or the tea factories, the local government, and also the national government. And I did training for a couple of years. To my surprise, the women accepted so much. The youth were also acceptable because I was with the youth when I was training on HIV and AIDS, and I was a very familiar person within the community. So at one time they said, yes, Flora, if you really want us to join leadership, you start by moving from talking to action. Why don't you lead us? I was surprised. I could not sit at the periphery and say, do it. Neither could I have preached water and taken wine. So I decided to accept the challenge. And that's when my program started. And it was something simple of text messages. Do not run for office. You have nothing to give to the community. How can a single woman lead? And how would you lead without a husband? You cannot be able to make a home. How are you going to be able to govern? Well, I had lots of friends in political leadership, and I did consult them to ask whether this is what goes on. And they told me, yes, welcome to politics. Welcome to politics. And I did not see how I could continue. But since we had a caucus of very great women, and since so many women had come out to say that we are going to change our country, we held hands, we created a sisterhood and said, we are going to have a thick skin too, just like the boys' club. And we comforted each other, we communicated, we did our networking. They came to my constituency, I went to their constituency, and I started really feeling that this is what I want to do. The text messages became phone calls. I started being